Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast. Sleepless nights and headache stack. Restlessness to hell and back.
Hi everyone, I just went to pick up my phone, so let's jump straight into a quick unboxing. This time I went with the silver version, not because it's cheaper on the second-hand market, obviously, but because it fits my aesthetic much better. The packaging is actually really thoughtful. There's even an iPhone strip included. Wow, they've wrapped everything so carefully, and the inner strap slides out really smoothly with just the right amount of resistance. The box itself looks almost exactly like what you've seen in the promotional ads, and honestly, it feels like packaging worth at least 300 yuan.
A quick shout out to my tech partner from China for sharing this video. A big thank you for making this possible. Hey everyone, it's Michael from Techiestreet. If you love staying updated with the latest gadgets, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our exciting tech content.
The phone itself isn't the focus right now, so I'm going to put it aside for a moment. Inside, we also get a silicone case with magnetic attachment support. The edges are fairly thick and soft, although they definitely look like the kind of material that could pick up oil pretty quickly. There's also a small piece of scrap paper, a wrist strap, and a metal magnetic stand. This wrist strap is interesting. This Honor phone might actually be the only domestic smartphone in the past decade that lets you attach a wrist strap directly without needing the phone itself to have a dedicated strap hole. And yes, there's also a 120-watt charger. The dual USB-C port design is simple and straightforward. 99.712 centimeters. So that's basically the complete package. After all, this is a 13,000 yuan phone, which works out to roughly £1,450 in the UK or around $1,927 in the US. So at that price, you'd expect the packaging and accessories to be pretty generous, right? Samsung. Now let's finally take a closer look at the main unit. The RoboPhone's display is just 6.3 inches, which is definitely considered compact by 2026 standards. But that actually makes sense here, because a gimbal is designed to be used with one hand. If the phone were much wider, it would become noticeably more awkward and uncomfortable to hold. And take a look at these book-like details on the metal frame. It's hard not to feel a little nostalgic looking at them. Xperia may be gone, but somehow its spirit still seems to be hanging around. As for this rear design, come on, there's no way you can tell me it doesn't look a little like an iPhone. It's supposed to be an innovative concept, yet the design itself feels surprisingly familiar. They say great design is universal, so why do questionable designs keep showing up? Once the case is installed, that top-heavy appearance becomes even more obvious, especially because of the rather large gimbal module. Personally, I'd probably attach the metal bracket to the back. It would make the phone look less plain, and it would also add a little extra weight. But keep in mind, the entire setup comes in at around 300 grams. A 6.3-inch phone that weighs 300 grams, would you actually be comfortable carrying that every day? And then there's the lens cover. The transparent material feels surprisingly nice when you touch it. When you're not using it, it can also double as protection for the gimbal lens. But there's one concern. If the drone is placed flat on a surface without its case, this lens cover becomes the only part touching the ground, which makes me a little nervous. It also picks up fingerprints very easily, and those fingerprints could potentially affect image quality. The mechanism is exposed from all sides, so dust can get inside pretty easily, and that could eventually lead to fogging. This RoboPhone only carries an IP54 rating, so if you've just come out of the shower, I'd definitely keep it away from water. With that level of protection, the chances of it completely giving up after a drop are pretty low. Still, it's obviously something you should treat carefully in everyday use. But enough with the complaints for a moment. Just look at this gimbal. The design is so sleek and mechanical, and you can actually feel a tiny bit of vibration from the motor as it moves. The way it unfolds is incredibly smooth. Before I actually got my hands on it, I wasn't expecting much because the advertisements had made me pretty skeptical. But now that I'm holding it, oh my god, I'm genuinely excited. How do I even describe the feeling? It feels much more muscular and substantial than Galax or DJI. If Galax is all about those satisfying clicks and clacks, Honor has a completely different character. Honestly, it's difficult to put into words. You kind of have to imagine the feeling yourself. I actually think Honor should add a really powerful startup sound effect to match the whole mechanical experience. Seriously, Honor, you should add that. As for the gimbal's actual imaging capabilities, I'm not particularly excited about that part. For one thing, modern smartphone main cameras with OIS/EIS solutions can already deliver pretty stable video recording, and secondly, Honor's imaging performance hasn't exactly been the most impressive in recent years. That said, this collaboration between Honor and Ari could theoretically bring some improvements. Just look at this rather melancholy interface. Look at that cinematic feel. And then there's this completely unnecessary, time-consuming animation every time you turn it on or off.
Many brands that were once barely known have suddenly become almost spiritual icons for a lot of people. That said, this user interface is genuinely very easy to use. The peak display feature during autofocus also seems to be something that other brands simply don't offer. However, switching between the three lenses still isn't particularly smooth, and when you're shooting in 4K at 120 FPS or 8K, ultra-wide-angle recording still isn't supported. Even when the gimbal is activated, whether you choose vertical or horizontal shooting, vertical recording is limited to 2.8K. If you want full-resolution 4K, you're left with a surprisingly small preview window. The gimbal shooting experience should already feel familiar to anyone who has used DJI video before. The only thing I'm still getting used to is the feel of those virtual control buttons. They're functional, but let's just say they're usable. Now, when it comes to image quality, this is footage captured by Honor. This clip was recorded on the iPhone 17 Pro, and this one comes from the Luma Ultra. Which one do you think looks the best? Of course, we'll save the detailed image quality comparison for the full review. What I'm actually much more interested in is the robot functionality of this gimbal, because that's the feature Honor has pushed so heavily in its advertising. But after using it for just one day, I can already say there's still a pretty noticeable gap compared with the 7th generation. When it comes to camera recognition, the accuracy and response speed are basically no different from what we've seen from other brands. And conversations with it still feel a little stuck. It doesn't properly recognize some fairly common gestures either. It can't even write a paper for me directly. I have to jump back into the regular YOYO app to get that done. As of the second day after launch, the robot still hasn't been fully integrated with the YOYO model. Different tasks require me to manually locate different AI entry points. Put simply, this robot currently feels more like one of many assistants rather than the manager coordinating everything. I'm not saying the robot is difficult to use, it's actually fairly straightforward, but so far I haven't discovered anything that makes its interaction efficiency particularly special. The amount of information the gimbal itself can provide is also relatively limited. If what Honor has created is essentially just a mobile geeky app, then the robot's advertising and its price feel a little premature. But honestly, I really hope it turns out to be something more than that. There's another issue I noticed. Whether you're using the robot functions or simply recording video, the upper section of the device gets extremely hot. Battery life also still needs proper testing, although based on the experience so far, I wouldn't expect the gimbal to be particularly power efficient. The best way to use it might actually be as a desktop stand, but there's a problem here too. Once the stand is attached, you can't stop charging, and because the robot interface doesn't support horizontal orientation, you can't really use it properly while it's plugged in. A charging port positioned on the side would have made much more sense. Hopefully, Honor eventually releases a dedicated charging stand for it. So after spending a full day with the RoboPhone, my first impression is that it's still quite different from the robot phone I had imagined. but I wouldn't call it disappointing. It's more like it landed exactly within my expectations. Whenever a company introduces a completely new form factor, there are inevitably going to be plenty of problems in the early stages. And honestly, I think Honor deserves credit for having the courage to come up with such a different concept in the first place. Since the launch, several of my friends who have elderly parents or autistic children have actually asked me whether this phone could work as a companion robot. That tells me something important. The idea behind this giant robot clearly has a potential market. But whether this phone can actually succeed will depend almost entirely on Honor's future product strategy, its execution, and most importantly, how seriously the company is willing to support the idea. This phone needs an entire ecosystem of supporting accessories and software. If it ends up being nothing more than a mirror-like gimbal recording device, then at best, this is simply an imaging flagship that went in the wrong direction. And with all the video equipment I already have, I'm certainly not going to let a single phone dictate my entire workflow. But now imagine if this thing could genuinely understand and see the world around us. Imagine it waking us up in the morning, talking with us at night, and actually behaving like a companion. And if we want to take the idea even further, Honor could theoretically build a 4-limbed exoskeleton and place the phone inside it, transforming the device into an actual robot. Now that would truly deserve the name RoboPhone. Knowing what we know about the Honor brand, do you think something like that is actually possible? For now, I'm going to keep using this phone as my main device for a while and see if I can unlock more of its potential. Of course, I'll also be paying close attention to battery life, camera performance, and all the weaknesses of the gimbal. Because no matter how impressive this device looks, at the end of the day, it's still a phone. Once the likes on this video expire, I'll get to work on a full Honor RoboPhone review as quickly as possible. I really mean it. This is Lao Xia. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Wait, you didn't expect that, did you? I'm back again. Just half an hour before this video was scheduled to go live, my RoboPhone actually malfunctioned. Normally, when you open or close the gimbal, the phone should detect the status of the lens cover, and if the cover is still closed, it should automatically remind you to open it before using the gimbal. But now the lens cover has become completely opaque, and even when the cover is closed, the gimbal makes a noticeable creaking and scraping sound internally. There also seems to be no foolproof protection mechanism when the gimbal retracts. I've already contacted Honor's after-sales service, so now I want to see how they handle the situation. Hopefully this is just an isolated case. Stay tuned for the update. Bye-bye.